Now, this last recording over the digestive system is going to look at the events that take place in the large intestine. So, what's come to the large intestine is you've got a lot of fluid, you've got some electrolytes in there, or anything that's undigested. But most digestion, and actually all your digestion of nutrients, has taken place in your small intestine, and all of them have been absorbed in the small intestine. So what happens in the the large intestine is that we're going to have to, primarily thing is to absorb any water that hasn't been reabsorbed, but majority of the water has been reabsorbed in the small intestine, and then kind of store the fecal material until it's time to void it. If we look at the consistency of the fecal material in the large intestine, is if you look in this region here, it's going to be more watery. Here it's not going to be, because this is more kind of the storage. Now, if something irritates the intestines, where it will trigger some reflexes that says, I don't like this is potentially harmful, we're going to move things along fairly quickly. If things move along the intestines too quickly, you're not going to absorb that water, and that's why you have diarrhea, where it's going to be a lot more, it's going to be watery. If things move very slowly along the large intestine, that's what can lead to constipation. So you absorb too much water, and then it'll be hard to actually defecate. Now, if we look at the different the parts of the large intestine, cover this in lab, is you have, again, the ascending colon, you've got the transverse colon, descending colon, here's your sigmoid colon here, and they got the rectum, and then out down here would be your anus. Now, if you notice again, in the large intestine, it does not have a continuous layer of longitudinal muscle around it. You have these strips of longitudinal muscle that we call the Taniya Coli. And the Taniya Coli, and you can see it spelled right there, here, is when you have contraction of the circular layer of muscle and the longitudinal layer of muscle at the same time. Areas where you don't have the longitudinal muscle, you're going to have it bulge out. The walls bulge out, and it creates what we call haustra. And the haustra is actually important in kind of creating a particular type of movement referred to as haustrations. So the haustrations result in, so if here's like a haustra here, is the material starts to move slowly up against the wall, and it increases the time where it can be exposed to the mucosal wall, so we can increase absorption of, say, fluid, and there'll be some electrolytes that will be absorbed too in the large intestine. Now, we do have mass movements in the large intestine, where usually correspond maybe 2 to 3 times a day, depends on the individual, usually with larger meals, is you'll have material move at once. And so you have, it's like this material all of a sudden is going to all together move here, and then move here. So they kind of move things, they call it en masse, all together. And think of it as just like we're freeing up some room, food's coming because you've eaten, so we need to move things along in the large intestine. And now, speaking of that, we got to talk about some reflexes. So, gastrocolic reflex, presence of material in the stomach triggers a reflex that we're going to see, an end result takes place in the colon, which is your large intestine. So this moves things along in the large intestine. Whole idea is to free up room. The duodenocolic reflex, presence of food in the duodenum, does the same thing. So the whole idea is moving things along because we have new stuff coming along. There actually is something called the ortho orthocolic reflex. I hope I have that name right. Orthocolic reflex. So ortho, it has to do with body position, is when you go from lying down, you go to sleep at night, and you get up after you've been sleeping so long at night, you change your body position. That change in body position triggers a reflex where things start moving along in the intestine. And if you think about it, a lot of people, not everybody, but a lot of people, first thing in the morning have to defecate. And so that change in body position from lying down to standing up, been lying down for a while, triggers that reflex to kind of move things along, get down things to the rectum. That's going to increase that urge to defecate. So just saying. The speaking of defecation, I do want to talk about the process of defecation. So the rectum, when it fills with fecal material, when it gets to a certain pressure, it will trigger the urge to defecate. But in order to defecate, we need to have this internal anal sphincter, which is smooth muscle, relaxed. But this external anal sphincter muscle, which is skeletal muscle, needs to be relaxed too in order for defecation to occur. Well, let's talk about some reflexes that are involved in defecation. And the reflexes, what we talk about, isn't going to do what we want to do to defecate. So we're going to have to work to actually defecate. So in a nutshell, what's going to happen, so a few things that will happen, is you've got stretch of the rectum. That stretch of the rectum triggers a reflex. So you got these stretch receptors there, and it's going to trigger these short reflexes and long reflexes. So the short reflex involves the myenteric plexus, which controls motility in the gastrointestinal tract. So it stimulates the myenteric plexus in the sigmoid colon, and which is right before the rectum, and says, okay, let's move some more stuff down. So might as well, you don't want to be pooping for days. Let's get it done in one time. So we're going to start moving things closer down into that rectum. But longer reflexes are going to involve where we're going to go to the level of the sacrospinal cord. And in the sacrospinal cord, we have a defecation center. So remember, we have a micturition center in the sacrospinal cord, S2 through S4. You have micturition center as well as a defecation center. So what's going to happen is that's going to trigger reflexes. It's not just one reflex. So one of the things that will happen by way of the pelvic splanchnic nerves, which carry parasympathetic fibers, they innervate the internal anal sphincter. That's going to lead to relaxation of it. Okay? So that will relax. But at the same time, through the pudendal nerve, the pudendal nerve is going to send impulses down and cause contraction of the external anal sphincter. So I want you to think about it. Material has moved into the rectum. If this reflex said, okay, it's time to defecate, if you had relaxation of the internal anal sphincter and the external anal sphincter at the same time, we'd all be pooping our pantses. So pants. So luckily, that contraction of the external anal sphincter takes place. So it keeps it in. But you're going to have that, you're going to have that information that eventually travels up to your cerebral cortex that says, oh, the urge to poop is there. Thankfully, my external anal sphincter has enough tone that it's contracted to keep anything from coming out. Now, unfortunately, I have to say, is the pressures can get pretty high. If they get high enough, I don't care how much you try to hold it in, it's going to come out. Just going to let you know that. But we'll say, okay, you haven't waited too long and you didn't have anything weird to eat or drink, is, okay, you have the urge to poop. So it's like, I'm going to the bathroom, and you've already got the internal anal sphincter relaxed. You have to You notice here it says voluntarily relax the external anal sphincter. So you have to voluntarily relax that. Generally, you have to kind of use your abdominal muscles, do what we call the Valsalva maneuver. So you have a closed glottis, and you try to. The term is like bear down, and sometimes you have to bear down to help to defecate. So you have to voluntarily relax the external anal sphincter to actually have the actual process of defecation to occur. So don't confuse defecation reflexes with actual defecation. So the defecation reflexes involve relaxation of the internal anal sphincter, but contraction of the external anal sphincter. You must voluntarily relax the external anal sphincter and to be able to actually defecate itself. Okay, so I just wanted to tell you about that. So this is the last for the digestive system. So we're going to end here.